This meeting is being recorded.
Hello and welcome to the Masters Swimming Podcast, available on all the major podcast platforms and on YouTube. I am Joe Malone, and joining me this week is a man for whom 2023 could be a really, really big year in the pool. So James Simpson, how you doing, mate?
I'm all right, thanks, Joe. Yeah, thanks for having us on.
No, you're welcome. It's look, so we talked last week on the podcast about like goal setting, long term, short term, and it made me think of you because and this genuinely could be a big year for you. But we've talked before, and you've said to me that you just love swimming up and down, right? So that's all you really focus on, nothing more, nothing less. But I guess given the context of what happened last year with you in the pool, maybe things have got to change for you now. Maybe you've got to think a little bit more about some kind of some goals, some strategy. I don't know, but that's what I want to talk to you about today. So I just want to give listeners a bit of context here. I was looking through your individual best times earlier on Swim England website, and so you're 27, right?
That's right. Yeah, 27. Yeah.
Yeah, and you basically have all of your PBs were set in 2022, lifetime PB, or at least Masters PBs. Are they lifetime PBs?
Yeah, I think all of them were. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there was one swim that was set where your record was 2021, and I think it was the 200 IM. So did you swim a 200 IM last year?
I don't think I did, to be honest with you.
There you go. So the chances are you'd have got a PB there as well. The point here is that you're 27, you're faster than ever, but you're actually getting scarily fast, and it's starting to raise a few conversations, which is why I wanted to get you on the podcast. So the first, I guess, question I've got for you really is, do you consider 2022 to be a bit of a breakthrough year for yourself?
It's a tough one because I've been swimming for quite a long time, like 18, 19 years, and I've always enjoyed it, and I've had like some successful times in it and some not so successful times in it. But I've always loved swimming. I think I never was really too interested and involved in winning stuff or like bettering my times. It wasn't like a be all and end all. I wasn't very competitive when I was younger, if I'm being honest. And now I'm in the position where I could win stuff in a race. Like sometimes it's more other people asking me, "Oh, you're ranked first for this." And my mindset is, I'd rather not know. I don't want to know because I'm not used to it. I just kind of want to go there and enjoy racing and enjoy the experience and how it feels and like what your body goes through on a race day. And that's what I sort of enjoy the most. But going back to the question of whether it's a breakthrough year, I think personally, I was like really pleased with how I swam throughout the course of the year because I got faster and I'd aimed specifically at Rome and the Nationals in October. And I had ideas of what times I wanted to go and how training was going throughout. And it was kind of nice to see the hard work being paid off. So I guess, it felt like a year where things did come together. Considering when I was younger, there was times where I trained just as hard, but the times didn't come. I think it's just one of those things where sometimes you have the rub of the green, sometimes you don't. But it was a lot more positive year. I don't know if it was a breakthrough. I'm not too sure like how to word it, but it was definitely a very positive year. And I loved swimming, and I still love it now, and I loved it back then. So I guess nothing's really changed in that mindset. But the difference is that I'm a bit further up the program than I was when I was younger.
Yeah, definitely. So I've got a few times there that I want to read out. So, we talk about being a breakthrough year. It was kind of more breakthrough second half of the year, to be honest. Yeah. So at the British Masters in June, you swam a 55.11 in your 100 freestyle. That's long course. Yeah. And then at Nationals in October, bear in mind this is short course, so obviously naturally there's always going to be a bit of time that's faster there. But you went and dropped a 51.21 in your 100 free. Short course. You said you had some aims about what you wanted to achieve. Do you expect to get a 51 at the Nationals? Because when I saw that time, I was like, wow. I've never seen you train. I've not really seen you race much before. So I didn't obviously know what to expect, but bear in mind what your PB was prior to that. I was stunned. Honestly, I really was.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much. I think in my mind, because in the previous year at National Short Course, I'd swam, I think, a 54.1 But then the day after, I had a relay, and it was a 4x100 mixed, I think, and I swam it a little bit differently. And I thought, oh, that felt pretty good, but it was tough, a lot tougher than it was an individual. And then one of the lads on the team, Paul, said afterwards, said, "Oh, I think your split was a 51.9." And I was like, it can't have been. Like, I can't have been 2 seconds quicker than I was in the individual. That was only yesterday. I was more tired then for the relay. And he was like, "No, have a look at it." And it was. So then in my mind, I thought, you know what? I could probably repeat that, because I was really tired on that Saturday for the relay. So the next year I thought I could probably try and get a 52 short course, or potentially a 51. And I was aiming for it, to be honest with you, at Northwest in the February, but I was ill that week. I got the flu, and I just had to say basically can the weekend. I still swam, but the times weren't great. But on the terms of the Nationals weekend, that was my 12th race of the weekend.
Yeah.
So I'd been putting 8 relays, and I had 5 individuals. So that was the Sunday morning, and I was just wiped out. Like, I was dead to the world. Even Beth will tell you, we went out for a Chinese buffet, and I was like falling asleep eating ribs on the Saturday night. Honestly, I was a zombie. We just had to get back to the flat, and I just got some kip. I was just dead.
Yeah.
So I thought in my mind, on a good day, I could probably get that 51 or 52. But on the morning, I mean, like I said, I was really not in a good way. I was exhausted, but I just wanted to give it my all and just see what would come out, and I'd take it or leave it, whatever the result was. I wasn't thinking about the outcome. I was just thinking about the execution of the race. And then I touched the board, and I think I nearly blacked out. I was just I was so tired, honestly. I just couldn't believe it. And then luckily, like Joe Keeley, one of my best mates from swimming, who was cheering me on, and was dead supportive. But yeah, I think I was pretty shocked as well. I didn't think it'd be that quick.
Yeah, I mean, 51.21, so we're talking really low 51 here, and you were questioning whether it could be a 52 or 51. Well, it was the other end of the extreme there, so that was brilliant. That was one of my regrets, by the way, of the Nationals weekend, is that I missed that race, because I actually fell ill on the Saturday night. Overnight, I woke up in the night and I was being sick, so I couldn't go and race myself on the Sunday, and I was supposed to be doing the 100 free as well. So I would have obviously seen you hit that time. Although fortunately Beth did send me the video of it after, so I have seen it. I've seen your race, and it's incredibly good. Something that is I find quite interesting, actually, is you said just earlier on that you were never that competitive, as a kid or whatever, and maybe even in the last few years, but as you've got faster, maybe you're thinking, a bit more seriously. Do you still consider yourself not competitive, or do you think you're a bit more competitive now because of where you're at?
I think it's a tough question, because I think for me, like, my mum and dad aren't into sport, so I don't come from a particularly sporty family.
Yeah.
They follow sport, and like my mum's more into it than my dad, really. So we're not got that sort of competitive streak drained into us. Whereas I think you probably seen it when you were younger. You had kids there who were competitive, and then you saw the parents, and you thought, well, that's where they get it from. You know what it's like. So I never really had that in me as a child. I think even still, like now, if I see myself like a bit higher up or as a potential medal, it doesn't spur me on as much as like going for a time, or even in training. I'm probably a bit more competitive in training than I'm in a race, because I'd never historically been that successful. I just thought, the race is what it is. You have to go out there and perform your best, and I'm sort of happier with how I performed than with any sort of like medals or anything like that comes with it. I just loved racing. I loved competing against other people, but was never really too let down by the outcome. It was always just enjoy it, and it is what it is at the end of the day. Just enjoy the process that you go through. But I think maybe it has changed a little bit in the last year. There's sort of some targets you think, well, they're a bit more achievable, let's go for them. But as I said, it's not. I think I am probably a little bit more competitive to come full circle. But it's hard, because I don't really have it in me naturally. So it's trying to get that urge. But I just want to keep enjoying my swimming and keep enjoying racing and competing.
I think you've actually got a really good mindset in that you say you're competitive. You want to execute a perfect race. So you've got that competitiveness in that you want to almost perfect the race and see how it feels and all the rest of it. So you take it really seriously, but it sounds like you don't hang on to the emotion. So if you don't do a great time, or you don't feel so great, as soon as that race is over, you can just put it behind you. And that's actually a great place to be, because I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that will hold on to that then for days, or, you know, they can't wait to the next race so they can put it right. But it sounds like you don't hold on to the emotion quite as much. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I think so. I think my mum would go spare if she heard me say this, but there was a lot of times where she'd watch me do awful races and she was more bothered about them than I was, because like I said, I wasn't too bothered about it. It is what it is, you know. You have to try and enjoy what you're doing. And I think for me, I was always, when I was younger, so anxious about competing. That was always a bit that I struggled with. I trained quite hard and I loved the training, but I got so anxious and nervous before races that the sort of execution of the race was so difficult for me sometimes. I think as I've got older, that's something that I enjoy more, is that I'm in a better mindset of going into the races, not being sort of so anxious. And I just love the racing now and the swimming. And I look forward to competitions, whereas prior it'd be, a bit, you know, not in a great space mentally.
Okay.
You know, I'd never get upset about the result, but it was just the sort of feeling prior that I just want to do myself justice. And it was sort of like letting myself down if I didn't do the right times. But yeah, I think it is better that way. But I mean, I'm not one to, like, after I finish, like, oh, I'll look at the results and see where I've come. It's just, oh, that was a really good race. I enjoyed it and the time was good, and it sort of reflects how I've been training. I guess maybe things might change in the future, but I just enjoy the composition and the swimming.
When did that change then? So if you said that you used to feel really anxious before a race, but now you don't, when did that change? And was it something that you did or worked on that helped you to get over that?
I think it's interesting you brought it up, because like before the podcast, I was sort of writing a few notes of sort of like my history of swimming, and I remember exactly when it was. I'd had a few years out of swimming. I finished when I was 18 at Swim Trafford, and then I came back to swim when I was about 21. I had about 3 years out. In that time, I was going to the gym and playing a bit of football, just casually. And my sister, I've got a younger sister who swam as well, and she said, "Oh, I've gone back to swimming at Flixton," because she'd come back from university. Which is my local club, a club that I swam at when I was 8 or 9. I swam with them for years. And she said, "There's a young coach there, and he's asked, you know, if there's some master swimmers about that you know of, and they can come down." And she said, "Oh, you ought to come get back into it. You know, you loved your swimming and everything. You don't have to compete or anything like that." So I was like, "All right, okay, I'll give it a try." And honestly, Joe, I got there at the pool, and it was basically a load of age group swimmers and my sister and like 1 or 2 master swimmers. I got in and I was like, I love it.
Yeah.
Like, why haven't I been swimming more? Because it wasn't, I think for me prior, when I was training, sort of held myself back a little bit. Was always a thought, well, I've got to compete really well in a few weeks, and that sort of pressure was sort of building on me. But when I got back in that time, I was like, this is just great. I love it. And I just started swimming again, started swimming twice a week, an hour sessions. It was like me and a load of kids. And the coach there, Phil, he was young, and he was like, he wanted to get people involved, and he made it more fun. And there's times where most sessions were just ending us doing relays.
Yeah.
And it would be, you know, me versus 16 kids or something like that, something dead interesting or funny. And they would all like try and race me doing 1 length each when I had to do a 400 or stuff like that. So it was immediately, I just thought, this is so much better. I think it just allowing myself that time sort of between 18 and 21 to maybe mature a little bit. Because I think, I mean, I still have like the mind of a child, as Beth will tell you. But I think men, or especially me, like, it took me a long time to mature mentally. And I think when I went back in, it was a big shift in how I perceived it. And that's probably been the biggest change, really, is that mentality of sort of believing yourself a little bit, but not being overcome and overwhelmed by the pressure. It actually allowed me to train better as well, sort of compete better. Which was a big difference for me.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And, you know, I've always advocated for master swimming in the sense that, you know, as an age group swimmer, you might be an age group swimmer for 10 years, but you could be a master swimmer for 60, 70 years. So actually, you know, it's a much more kind of all encompassing in your life, really. But what I really love about master swimming is that it's very much your choice. You know, you're the adult here. You know, you choose that you want to go training. Whereas as an age group swimmer, as a kid, you know, sometimes it might be your parents saying, "Oh, no, go on, don't quit yet, keep going," or they know it's good for your fitness, they know it's good for your social developments. They kind of maybe push you along. So you're never 100% sure whether a child genuinely loves swimming, but you know, with an adult, if they're making that choice to go themselves, they're doing it for a reason. They're doing it for themselves. And I have a similar thing with to you, really, in that I stopped when I was 18 as well. I had 5 years away from the water. Again, similar to you, went to the gym, played loads of football. That was my main thing, I suppose, really. And then at 23, I got back in and fell in love with it way more than I'd ever loved it as a kid.
Yeah.
So it's a similar thing, really. And I really like that. Let's go back to some of your times. Again, I was looking through the list and they're all really good. Which strokes and sort of distances do you consider to be your best?
I think historically, I've always been a breaststroker, right from when I was a young kid, when I first started swimming at Flixton. And that's along with that, a freestyler. And I think that sort of gradually changed as I got older. And I sort of, between sort of the ages of 16 and 18, I sort of specialised in the sort of sprint breaststroke and sprint freestyle. And then when I went back swimming again and I wanted to compete and do some races, it was always the 50s and 100s, freestyle and breaststroke for me. I think over the years I did quite a lot of IM because the coaches that I had when I was younger were sort of really focused on all 4 strokes. And I was always like technically a good swimmer on, decent enough on all 4 that I could do an all right IM swim. But yeah, predominantly the freestyle and the breaststroke.
Yeah, sounds good. So, I mentioned so many times earlier and I've kind of read them out. I don't obviously have context on where you're at, say, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years ago with your times. How much have you progressed over the last, let's say your last race you did pre-COVID, kind of how much faster are you now to then?
A lot faster, really. I mean, some of those times that you read out were, like you said, 3 or 4 second PBs. I've not swam those races, especially the 100 free, competitively since I was, I think, 18.
Right.
When I was at Flixton, the coach there wanted us to do Arena League because Flixton hadn't done it for years. So my first competition back was Arena League, and we were at Ellesmere Port, but there was no timing pads. It was just have a stopwatch. So we were doing some relays, and I think I did the individual 100, and the coach there was like, "Oh, that was I think a 56 something." I thought, "Oh, that's only like a second or so slow, and I'm only doing 2 sessions a week compared to the 8 sessions I was doing when I was 18." So I thought, that's not too bad. That things must have changed. And then I think after that he wanted me to do some. He sort of advised, "We're going to go to Lancashire, so we're going to do this meet. You should do it." And he sort of like did push me a little bit, which I'm kind of glad, because without him, I probably wouldn't have competed again individually. I would have just been happy doing the relays at Arena League and helping the team out and just swimming with the kids, because swimming with those guys sort of made me realise how much I loved it, because they just had the passion that I had when I was younger, and it was kind of fun. But I stopped. I did my last race, I think, the year before COVID. And when I was 25, I'd always said I wanted to do the Master Swimming at Trafford Metros and join them. And then that's basically it. That was where I was up to. I'd done like 1 or 2 races individually, and they were sort of around my PB. So I did in my mind think, well, if I train a bit more at Trafford Metros, which is what they could offer me, the few more sessions, maybe those times would drop. And it was sort of an experiment to see what would happen. And I didn't think they dropped that much. So it was quite a nice surprise. But it was probably, some of those times are a lot quicker than when I was 18. But I'd not really done many individual races prior to last year or the year before. And prior to COVID, I was in decent shape. But again, I was only doing 2 sessions a week in the gym and then playing football, and wasn't really taking the competition seriously. Didn't shave down. Anything like that. So rocked up to the meets with a hairy chest and a big beard. So it wasn't exactly taking it that seriously, but I just enjoyed it and had fun. And mine thought, well, they're decent times, and they probably could drop a little bit. But it was a bit of an experiment. I didn't really have an idea.
No. So what does your training look like now then? So how many sessions are you getting in the water, and are you still going to the gym?
Yeah. So prior to sort of the new year and prior to nationals, really, it was like 4-5 sessions a week in the pool and 3 sessions in the gym at most. And that was sort of like pre-competition phase. But I did sort of periodize it. There was times before, earlier on in the year, where it was sort of wasn't as intense. I would do 4 sessions in the pool and 1 or 2 in the gym, which was sort of a bit more of a healthy balance. But pre-competition, I did like to sort of kick it up a little bit and maybe the thing is at Trafford on a Sunday, we have the sprint sessions, which was kind of useful to me. So it was a big session on a Sunday, and we could really focus on the sort of shorter distances, which I liked, and it proved beneficial in the end. But at the minute, it's 3 or 4 sessions in the pool and 2 or 3 in the gym.
Brilliant. Well, one of the realities that we face as master swimmers is that, I've said this many times now, we're adults, so we have full-time jobs. What do you do as a career, and do you feel like that helps you in terms of training? And because some people work all the hours, and then they struggle to get to training. So what's your job, and do you think it's a good healthy balance for you?
Yeah, so I'm a plumber full-time, and it is. For me, I'm quite lucky because I do have a sort of healthy routine. I work in the day, so I'm not on a shift rota, which, like some of the swimmers that I swim with, they could be working nights one day and then they're whack in the morning. So it's hard to sort of balance that. So I'm quite lucky. It means that I'm home at a reasonable time, and I can get back and have something to eat, and I can get to training quite regularly. There's some times where it's not possible. I'm working weekends or whatever, so there's some sessions that are missed. But I'm never too worried about that, because sometimes you can be a bit too focused on, I'll need to do this amount of sessions. But say if you're working late, you're still active, you're still sort of mentally going, and you don't have to be at it all the time. There's other sessions you can pick up when work's a bit lighter. But for me personally, I like being active. So having an active job in the day where I'm moving around, it keeps me sort of mentally switched on a little bit. And there's times where it's like physically exhausting and you come back and you're pretty tired. And that's why I just say to sometimes it's an achievement getting to the pool at that point. You just have to celebrate the small successes. Whatever you train, however you train, that's just the way it is. That's what comes out. You can't really be annoyed at that or upset about it. Just get to the pool and get in, and whatever it is, it is. So for me, it suits me because I like to be on the go. And I think that does help me a little bit, having sort of a routine as well.
How do you get enough food in if you've got such an active job, and then you're like pretty much training every day? If you think about the water or the gym, I mean, you must just be chomping all day.
Yeah, well, I think Beth will testify to that. I do like my food, but just a lot of Greggs, to be honest with you, Joe. A lot of Greggs.
Brilliant. Well, you did just mention her, and we can't. It would be remiss of us not to mention the Master Swim podcast's very own Beth Hogg. She is your partner, of course. Is it good having a partner that swims as well? And do you kind of motivate each other to, if one of you doesn't quite fancy training tonight, the other one's going on, oh, come on, we've got to go, and it must be quite helpful.
Yeah, I think it kind of works both ways. I think it's really good that Beth is in swimming, because it's great having a girlfriend and a partner that's into the same things that you have, and you have the same passions and hobbies. Because I mean, just even logistically, if you want to train 4 or 5 times a week in the pool and go to the gym a lot, then there's going to be obviously time that you can't see your partner or whatever, and sometimes that can cause a bit of friction. But it's kind of nice we both have that interest. We want to sort of push ourselves and see what we're capable of physically, which is kind of good. Like you said, it does push us. But it does come with its problems. Like sometimes you might have one person does really well, the other one doesn't so well. So it's hard to sort of balance that. But it's kind of good because it's humbling that you have to constantly put yourself in other people's shoes. It's like, it doesn't matter how well you do, it's how well we do as a team, like together. And it's kind of good because it forces you to be a bit more sort of like mature in that your response to stuff. But you're right, it probably does push us along. Like we're constantly like trying to get the best out of each other. I mean, it's kind of fortunate we're not in direct competition. I'll never race against her, but it's good to see your partner getting after something and it's being quite ambitious, which is it's good. And I think we both enjoy it as a whole, the swimming, which does make a big difference, because it means that those things that us swimmers can be quite boring. All we want to do is look at people swimming down the pool. And if you're sat there watching videos on it, it doesn't make a very interesting company. But it's lovely to have that together and share those sort of passions and those ambitions together.
And I think personalities make a big difference, because we hear from Beth obviously very often on this podcast, and it sounds like she wants you to do as well. Wants you to do well more than she wants herself to do well. And you seem like a very humble guy as well. So actually, the fact that you're both so supportive of each other is probably helpful. Whereas if you were both uber competitive and quite self-centered, then there might be there might be problems. I actually have a similar thing where Kirsty, my partner, she doesn't swim, but she plays hockey. So she's part of a club I'm part of a swimming club, so we both have our own thing, but it's almost a shared hobby in that we both do competitive sports. And we have this thing where I think I might have mentioned it on the podcast before, actually, but we have PB for pizza. So if ever I get a PB, she gets the pizzas in that night. And when she plays hockey, if she scores, I get the pizza in because she sort of plays right forward. So she's, has the chance to score quite frequently. So we have like a nice little competitive game in that sense, which is quite nice. But like you say, we're not in the same sport, but we're kind of in a competitive environment together, which is quite nice, actually, because, I go and watch her play hockey every so often, which is a lot more interesting than her coming and watching me swim because, as we all know, she has to sit there all day to watch me swim for like 30 seconds. At least I get to play a full-on 70-minute game, but no. So thinking about this year then, it could be a massive year for you. Do you have some very specific goals, or are you just going to see where it takes you?
I think personally, for me, it's just to carry on enjoying swimming. It's like the main thing, if you don't love it, you'll never go very far on it. But on sort of a more specific level, there's times that in sort of competitions that I want to go to. I recently, like the week before Christmas, entered like an age group meet to get some licensed times, because I think that's something that you've raised up on the podcast, is that we have masters, we have these times, but they're not licensed, so you can't do sort of age group events or sort of licensed meets, which is kind of frustrating. So a few of us from Trafford Metro went down to a small little meet with the long-term ambition, very long-term, is to try and qualify for British champs in the April, and potentially at some point in the future. Whether it happens this year or next year or the year after, I'm not like that bothered about, but it'd be lovely to get, because I think summer times are pretty close to the qualifying times. So I'd love to be able to swim there, just because it's something that, as I've said before, when I was younger, it felt so far away from what I was capable of. And it was that's kind of like the big ambition. And potentially after that, me and Beth are thinking about maybe going to Japan and doing the Worlds there. But it just becomes down to a bit of a fiscal decision, because we're looking at flights and stuff, and it's quite steep. It's quite steep.
Yeah.
But I think that's about it, really. Like, there's times in terms of, I've written some down, because when you mentioned it before, I was like, I better start writing some down. There's times where I think they're possible. So I think on the 100 free, trying to do that long course, because as I said before, the nationals are in Sheffield. Trying to get that time down, because that's the first time I'd swam it last year when we went to Aberdeen. And unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to swim it in Rome. Just trying to get that down and see how close I can get that to sort of where I want it to be. So it's kind of, there's rough times and stuff, but I think this year more sort of focused on, let's say, like the long course nationals in June would be like one of the big aims, because whether or not we end up going to Japan is like a big decision or not. But then so that accompanied with trying to get to British champs.
So you talk about British champs then. Do you believe in yourself? Do you reckon you can make it?
Yeah, I think I back myself. I think I've looked at the times this year and I think I can do them. The problem is logistically, because I'm not too familiar with how it works. But one of the lads at Trafford Metro said there's like a window that you have to swim in to qualify for them.
Right.
So it's about finding a meet that's within that window. And at the minute, the times that I did in December, they don't qualify, because I have to do it long course. And even to do one of these long course meets, I have to get a license, a level 2 meet or something. I don't know. It's really like a bit of a logistical nightmare. So trying to find the meets within that time frame that I can qualify for. So I've qualified for the regionals Cheshires, which I'm swimming at the end of the month. So hopefully from there, once I've got some of those times, and then I can try and plan it a bit further in advance and see what meets I can go to then potentially get the British champs. It's a long-winded way around it, but that's the life of a masters swimmer, I'm afraid.
Yeah, but it's very exciting as well. And what I really like about your, I guess, journey, story, however you want to phrase it, really, is that quite a lot of the time you get swimmers that, when they're age group swimmers, when they're kids, they're really good, and they get, they're aiming to try and, make it maybe pro or whatever, and then maybe it doesn't quite happen for them, and then they become master swimmers. They still really love swimming, and they're still really fast, but I guess they'll always have that that thing inside them that's like, I'm not as quick as I used to be, or I never quite made it. Whereas you're in this really unique position where, you said yourself that you were kind of nowhere near those times as an age group swimmer, and even as a master swimmer a few years ago, but you're just getting faster and faster, and now you're on the brink, and you've never been in that place before, and it's just, I would imagine it's a pretty rare thing to happen. So it is a unique situation.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm, like I said, not used to it, and it is quite exciting because you constantly think, well, when I was younger, those people that went to those meets, I put those people on a pedestal, and that was maybe sort of the wrong attitude to have. You think, well, they have something that I don't have, I could never do that. And it wasn't that like I was a terrible swimmer. It's just that I think overall, I was reflecting on this the other day after we had a chat, and it was, I think the frustrating thing when I was younger was that it was like unfulfilled potential. I felt like I could have done better, but I just didn't know what I was doing wrong. I was watching people train not as hard as me, beat me in races after I'd beaten them for months in training. They'd get to a race and then they'd smash me, and I'm thinking, this doesn't quite add up. And that was sort of one of the heartbreaking things about when I was younger, was that you'd see people who you think, well, not to say that they don't deserve it, but I know for a fact that I'm training harder than them. I've beaten them in training. They'd get to a race and they'd just be miles ahead of me, and I'm thinking, well, what's going on? It just didn't add up. And that was always the thing in the back of mind, that, they have something that I don't have, which is, it's not the right attitude to have, but I was only young, and it's hard to understand those things. And I think that just came down to the sort of, that built upon that sort of like performance anxiety. I was worried, I was anxious, I wasn't thinking straight prior to races. But come back to it now, like I'm a bit more relaxed about it, and it is quite exciting. Like I look at those things, I think, God, I could actually achieve something that's quite special, and it's quite special to me. And I'd love to be able to go and do it. But it is quite rare, because, as you said before, there's swimmers who've always swam well, and I swim with swimmers like that. You've literally summed up quite a few swimmers that I know, and it's kind of rare to be in that position, I guess. And you're right, but I love it, and I've always liked swimming, and I think it does sort of, having that love for it makes you sort of like really enjoy it and just enjoy the ride, and sort of hopefully make more memories along the way.
Listen, it's really inspiring. It inspires me. I know it'll inspire other people, because you're 27, which to a lot of master swimmers will be very young. But the whole point of this conversation is to say that it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter how good or average you used to be, you can keep getting better. So that kind of leads me on to this question, which, and I appreciate this might be quite hard to articulate. But I would imagine a lot of people listening to this now will be thinking, well, what are you doing differently now to what you were doing as an age group swimmer, or even 3, 4, 5 years ago as a masters? Why are you so much faster now? Is it literally just train, and one day it just ticks? Or is there something that you've done, some kind of magic pill that people are like looking at and thinking, I want a piece of that,
No, I think really it's just a shift in mentality. I think I was probably always capable of swimming and performing well when I was younger, but I probably just didn't have the right mentality. I think that's, for me, trying to sort of take a step back and look at what I've done and what I've done differently. It's hard, that I think, like you said, that it's hard to articulate, because really, truth be told, I don't actually know. There's certain things I can point to and say, this has changed, so that might have helped. But the big thing for me, I think, is mentality. My mentality has definitely changed. It's a lot more positive. I think it's interesting speaking to other people, and it's like you have that conversation. What do you tell yourself before you get in, before you're about to race? What do you tell yourself? And if you sort of verbalize it and say out loud, you start to think, is that the best approach to get the best result? Probably not. Sometimes we might be a bit too harsh on ourselves, or we're constantly thinking, I need to get this time, That doesn't feed into a good performance or a good result. So now my mentality is, specifically on race days, is just be as relaxed as calm as possible, and try and empty my mind as best as I can. I mean, Beth will tell you that's quite easy, because there's not much up there anyway. But that's my sort of mentality, and I think really it's like caring less about what happens. It's thinking about what you're doing, which I wrote a few notes down. It was always like, I try to remember it now, is when I was swimming, and especially when I was training, I was kind of worried about what I was times I was doing in training. I was constantly looking at the clock.
Right.
And now I think I'm swimming with a bit more sort of like freedom.
Mm.
You know, I don't have to hit those times constantly. I don't have to train this hard all the time.
Yeah.
It's sort of knowing when to push, when to pull, and it's knowing when to sort of take a step back and say, look, listen to yourself, trust what you're doing is the right thing. You're working hard, you're exerting yourself, and the times and stuff will come. And sort of having a bit more trust within what you're doing. That sort of helped me swim better on race day, but it's also, I think, helped me train better. There's sometimes where
kind of, it goes back to something that you said earlier, actually, which was that it's the small wins, and actually just turning up is an achievement sometimes if you're not feeling so good. And that really fits in with what you just said there about you don't have to smash every session. And actually, sometimes if you train and actually you don't train that well, it doesn't matter. You turned up. So you kind of, the momentum is, you're keeping that momentum. You're not breaking your rhythm. And I think that is a huge thing in sport.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like there's sometimes where it's I always have like try and have little positive catchphrases, and like we finish a session and people are like absolutely exhausted, and it's just money in the bank. It's just banking it. You do the session, you bank it, and you don't look at it ever again. And that's the way to sort of look at it sometimes. There's sometimes where it's a focused session, you think, right, this needs to be like all in. And even then you might not get the times you want, but it's all about the effort. If you've exerted yourself, you've put yourself, I think sometimes mentally in the well, you've put yourself in there, like you've really dug deep to sort of really persist. Doesn't matter what the times are, as long as you've got yourself in that hole and then you've carried on and done the session, it's you've expanded your mind, you've pushed yourself so much that you believe that I can struggle through that and I can suffer, but I can come out of the side. And at the end of the day, you know what it's like when you're racing. That last 25 meters, you will be thinking that thing, you'll be feeling that, and you know that place all too familiar. And you think, well, I've been training that way, in that mentality, and the feeling that, then I know I can do it. And I think that's what it's all about. Is like, it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't have to be 100% of the time. It's just knowing what you're doing and how you're doing it, and when to push yourself.
What's interesting again is that you said you try and clear your mind before you go in for a race. On Brett Hawke's podcast, he had James Simpson on recently, and they did almost like a bit of sprint masterclass. I don't know if you heard that, but I really like what James said about some of the work that he's done with his swimmers, so that when they are actually swimming, they have certain trigger points and things that they think about, but it's totally personal to them. So he doesn't tell them what to think. They have to decide for themselves. But he said it will be things like when they're on the block, all he wants them to think about is, good start. That nothing else matters, good start. And then there'll be, for example, 15 meters in, he wants them to think hips high. So, and he wants them to just say it over and over again in the head whilst they're racing, just keep your hips high, keep your hips high. And I love that. And that's something I've never done before. And it's something that I'm going to try and implement myself. So you talked about clearing your mind. Are you, when you're racing, have you got certain things that you're thinking like, I just hit this turn well, or are you kind of talking yourself through the race?
Yeah, I think it's something that you raise a good point there, because it's something that I've always sort of struggled with prior, but in the last sort of 18 months is experiment with a few things. Sometimes there's races where I think I've sort of done recently is the dive and the start is like happens so quickly that you can barely think about it. So I'm thinking, I'm just going to think about the first few strokes. I've dived into the pool so many times before. Some of them not great, some of them a lot better than others. So just rely on yourself to do the right thing. And it's all about sensation and the feeling, and trust your instinct. You know when to start kicking, you know when to make the transitions, you know when to come up. Don't think about that like it's sort of programmed in your mind. You've done it millions of times before, and just think about the first stroke. And it sort of takes the edge off things, because you're already sort of like thinking the swimming part, and you're not sort of overwhelmed about getting on the blocks. All that stuff's been done in my mind. And it's just think about the swimming and enjoy that bit, because that bit it's sort of like automatic. It happens in my mind so quickly that before I know it, I'm up and I'm swimming anyway. So just forget about it. There's nothing you can do to change it. Just get up and start swimming.
I love how you're always referring to like how it feels, the sensation, and it's really, I find that really, really interesting. So final question then, because of where you're at now, and you've said that it's maybe all a bit more serious to you now. Obviously, you still want to enjoy it, have fun, all the rest of it. But has things changed now in terms of, so obviously when you go training, you're all in mentally on the session. But when you're at work or you're on a weekend chilling out, are you thinking about swimming a little bit more now, but in the context of like everything that comes with swimming? So are you thinking about your rest and your recovery and your diet and all? Is it a bit more consuming to you now?
Yeah, I think I've noticed that over the last year. There has been times where I'm at work and I'm thinking I feel a bit more stressed than usual, and then in the back of my mind I'm like, oh, that's because I'm going to Rome in the next few weeks, so I've got nationals in a few weeks.
Yeah.
So that has sort of played a part. I think one of the things I tried to work on, or said I'd work on after nationals, was actually trying to avoid that.
Switch off.
Think about swimming, let those thoughts happen and let them drift, because you can't control what you think, but just let them be what they'll be, and trying to sort of limit the stress. But I think before a competition, it's always in the back of your mind. You can just feel this niggling thing in the back of your mind thinking, well, I want to do this, I want to do that, and I don't want to go out, and go for a curry with the lads at the weekend because I really want to rest on a Sunday so I can go to the gym or I can swim or whatever. So sometimes that does play a part, and you just have to be sort of careful. I think it's sometimes a balance, really. You know yourself, like what your limits are, and I just find that balance. You want to be able to enjoy yourself, but there have been times, like you say, where you think, I'm not going to do this because I'll just be knackered tomorrow and I really want to train hard. And you just have to be careful, because sometimes it's a good thing, you still want to keep the momentum, you want to take days off and all that stuff and have the right mentality, but it's a balance at the end of the day. We're swimmers and we're people and we have other hobbies and other interests in life, so you have to sort of accommodate those and understand that we're not Olympic athletes, we're people who love swimming and we want to compete well, and there is a balance somewhere in the middle. Is like a happy medium. But I think to answer your question, it has changed a little bit. It's something that maybe I think I noticed a bit more last year, but I would like to be a bit more sort of stress free. But would we all?
No, I think it's interesting. I think I don't think anybody ever feels like they've cracked it in terms of training, mindset, or we always feel like we need to get better and find a balance, like you were saying. So no, really interesting. I absolutely loved that chat, and I'm going to be watching you with interest this year, definitely. I wish you all the best. I really, really hope that you kind of get what you want this year and achieve the times that you want to achieve, because it's really exciting, mate. 27 and you're getting faster and faster. I love it. It's so inspiring. Thank you for coming on the podcast as well. Really appreciate it. And catch you soon.
Oh, thanks very much, Joe. It's been a pleasure.
Nice one.